Skamous gritted his teeth as he looked at the group in front of him. Jess, Sigort, and Elizabeth's brother Ren stood, weapons bared. Sigort stepped forward, waving a small burlap sack in front of Skamous' face. "You want the mandrake so bad? Why don't you take it from me?" As if hearing the sound outside the bag, the creature inside started shifting, trying in vain to find some way of escaping its cloth prison. The tension that had been building in Skamous seemed as though it was about to explode, when from his left there was a blur of movement, and then suddenly the sack Sigort held was falling. One of Thalos' daggers was in its place, protruding from Sigurt's now ruined hand. Elizabeth dove to catch the bag, and a crossbow bolt whizzed over her head. Completing her roll, she looked up to see Ren, looking more surprised than she was. His look of surprise lasted only moments, though, as another one of Thalos' daggers flew through the air, mere inches from his crossbow hand. Sigurt growled in pain. "I'm gonna make you pay for that," pulling a scimitar from his hip with his one good hand and aiming a downward chop at Skamous' head. Skamous ducked the unpracticed blow, and then drove his head back up, slamming into Sigurt's clenched jaw. The blow left Sigurt reeling, and allowed Skamous to pull his staff from his back. The two came together again, fast, Skamous blocking a feint, only to have Sigurt bring up his ruined hand in a bloody fist across his face. The punch seemed to do more damage to Sigurt than it did to Skamous, though, as he stumbled back, screaming in agony. Skamous brought his staff up defensively, eyeing Sigurt, while Thalos and Ren flung projectiles at each other. Jess and Elizabeth stood in the center of the clearing, eyeing each other, Jess brandishing her wicked dagger, and Elizabeth her rapier, as well as the squirming bagged mandrake. It was only when a hulking green shape dropped from the canopy above on top the wounded Sigurt, cutting his screams of pain off with a wet, sickening thud. Everyone stopped and turned to see what fresh hell had joined the fray. Even hunched over as it was, the form that now stood on top the unmoving body of Sigurt stood well over 7 feet tall. Its frame was long and wiry. The skin that hugged its body was a moss green, with ragged gray patches flecking the surface. Its eyes glowed a malevolent red as it pulled Sigurt out from underneath itself with its long, 3-fingered hand, licking the blood that was trailing down Sigurt's arm, and then holding the limp Sigurt. The creature leaped back up into the forest canopy, disappearing from sight before any of the combatants had time to react in the slightest. The two groups stood stone still, looking around and listening for anything else that may be lurking in the shadows, the worries of moments ago seemingly forgotten for the time being, as they moved close to one another. Horror plainly etched on each of their features after watching the murmuring woods exact its price for the noisy disturbance their battle had caused. After what felt like hours of standing there without anything happening, Jess spoke up. We have to go after that thing. We have to save Sigurd." Skamous turned toward her, a look of pained sympathy written across his features. "There's no saving him, Jess. You have to know that." Jess shook her head vehemently, tears streaking her cheeks as she did so. I have to try. Unlike you, I can't just leave my friends behind." Saying this, she turned, dragging a stunned-looking Ren along with her. She headed in the direction the creature had leapt off with Sigurd. Wordlessly, Thalos began walking the clearing, picking up and sheathing the multitude of daggers he had flung. Elizabeth slowly and gently slid the bag off the mandrake's head. The small creature was no bigger than a foot tall, and weighed very little. Its body composed of several spindly roots that acted as both legs and arms to the squirming little thing. Upon being let out and seeing Elizabeth's placating face, it made a strange keening noise, much like a baby would to its mother. Elizabeth cooed at the thing happily, laughing, and then stooped to pick it up. As she did, many roots wound its way around her waist, seemingly to enjoy her warmth. "Well, it seemed like we were able to save this little guy. Now let's get him back, before something decides we look like a tasty snack." Skamous grimaced at the jest, his eyes still firmly staring at the stained earth where Sigurd had been only moments ago. Thalos came up beside him, bumping Skamous with his elbow, and giving him a sad smile. "I know it's hard losing friends, but we're doing a good thing here. No time to lose yourself in grief. We still have to get this thing back and find our way home. It's just hard. They were my friends when I was much younger. We all used to goof off together, you know. When I started training with my weapons master, there just wasn't time anymore. Sigurd was content to just hang around till the trials came. He told me I betrayed him by choosing practice over our friendship. I always thought when the trials were over, we could patch things up. Thalis put a hand on Skamous' back, and an unreadable expression crossed his face. Take it from me, someone who knows. You can't keep your mind on the past. You have to use it to become stronger, and make sure it doesn't happen again. Skamous nodded his head, and the group started back through the woods, eventually coming across the looming shape of the treant. You have returned, and with the mandrake. When I sent you off, I assumed you would merely run off and destroy other pieces of my home. I couldn't be happier to be wrong. Elizabeth stepped forward, gently unwrapping the mandrake from her waist, and held it up toward the treant. The treant slowly extended a branch down toward the mandrake, allowing it to tangle itself up amongst its leaves before moving the branch back up to safety. You have come to my forest, and you have proven you deserve my time and my respect. I misjudged you, and for that I am sorry. Tell me, do you participate in this game you humans play so often in my home? Elizabeth grimaced. We do, albeit only by necessity. The game you speak of is how our people's vocations are chosen. The treant sighed, a sound that made its leaves rustle. Then, as you have helped me, I will help you in turn. I grow one fruit from my branches each century, while normally it is kept so that I may gift it to the animals of my wood. I instead offer it to you. It holds within it a vestige of my magic and a small coalition of my intellect. Take it with you and use it as you see fit. I only hope that with this gift you may also take away the seriousness of my circumstance here within the woods, and how your city's games are a plague upon the creatures that call this home. Skamous stepped up, accepting the proffered fruit. We won't forget, and we will do what we can to stop the harvesting of your home. The three stood and then walked a bit away before Elizabeth started the process of bringing to life her miniaturized dog statue. 10 minutes of preparation and the dog figurine grew fur once again. This time, though, it did not happily wag its tail upon being summoned. Instead, it growled, then lifted its leg, letting out a small stream of urine all over Elizabeth's hand, before once again becoming immobile. Thalis chuckled. Was that supposed to happen? Elizabeth huffed. Of course not. Remember when I told you these things don't always go right? Now, make yourself useful, and go ask the treant for directions." A couple awkward moments later, and they were on their way back toward Rothgar. While they walked, Skamous studied the fruit they'd been gifted. It was shaped like an almond, with skin the same color of the oak that the treant had been made out of. But instead of being hard as a rock like he expected, it was velvety soft. "I wonder what this'll do," Skamous said as he slowly packed away the fruit. Thalos looked up at the slowly darkening sky. "It'll have to do. I don't want to be out here when the sun goes down." The three marched on in silence for some time, keeping a wary eye on the surrounding vegetation, until finally, in the last light of day, they came upon the tall, looming gates of Rothgar. 4 guards sat by the gate. Seeing the 3 of them approach, one of the guards stood, stumbling around as he did so. "Hey, you survived. Good for you. Go on in," he said, waving his hand, as the 3 of his equally inebriated comrades struggled to get the gate open. Only after Skamous and Thalos offered help were they able to get the gate open, and the 3 of them stepped once again into the city of Rothgar. Elizabeth shook her head as they walked away. "I can't believe they're drinking. What if someone was hurt or needed their aid?" Thalos scoffed. "You haven't obviously had much interaction with the god, have you? In the Warrens, they're more likely to beat you for coin than they are to help you stop a robin, especially one of the non-human races such as yourself." Elizabeth's face reddened. "I wasn't allowed outside of the house much." A look of indignation crossed Thalos' face. "Why, were your parents worried you'd get your skirt dirty at a tea party? You'd have nothing to worry about. The guards take care of those in the higher district." The look that crossed Elizabeth's face was not that of rage that Skamous had expected, but instead was one of sad resignation. "Honestly, I wouldn't know. All this is just a show," she said, gesturing down to her clothing. "My parents are as poor as they come. They kept me and my brother hid away most of our lives, and then spent everything they had to make us look highborn for these trials. They thought it might give us a better shot at scoring jobs within the palace." Elizabeth looked up, unvolunteered tears brimming at the corner of her eyes. "I think we're actually not too far from my home, believe it or not." Thalos' face was one of both surprise and apology. "What about the story about your handmaiden and your mirror?" Elizabeth let out a weak chuckle. "That was actually my mother. She was so mad. It was actually the only mirror we had in the house." Thalos looked down bashfully. "I know the feeling. My parents died when I was 12. I was bounced from one orphanage to the next ever since. Never really had much ever since." Thalos cleared his throat. "Well, we best get back to the trial center and see what's next." The trio continued as they approached the town center. The scene was much different from when they left off. The signature tents had been taken down, and the area was filled with several individuals mulling about. Some were teary-eyed, some were drunkenly laughing, and a great deal many had blood soaking parts of their gear. When they entered the clearing, the trial master approached them, still wearing his customary raven-feathered cloak. "I was observing your progress, and might I say, well done. The vast majority of today's festivities are done. We will be having a small ceremony for the dead at the stroke of midnight. Till then, you're free to do as you wish. I would suggest you getting a drink after what you went through. I bet you could use it." Saying this, he flipped each of them a gold coin, and then walked away. Elizabeth smiled brightly at the coin, and then a grimace crossed her face. "I would love to celebrate, but I have to go look around and see if my idiot brother made it back alive. I'll meet back up with y'all at the vigil tonight." Skamous turned to look at Thalos. "Guess it's just you and me." Thalos' face fell, doing an exact copy of what Elizabeth had done only moments earlier. Skamous sighed. "No need to say it. I'll meet up with you at the vigil." Thalos nodded his thanks at Skamous' understanding and disappeared back into the city. Skamous glanced around him as he walked, realizing he was alone again. Letting out a huge sigh, he let his mind wander to the past couple of days. Everything had been moving so quickly, he barely had time to process the events that were taking place. Now, though, as he walked through the darkening streets, He felt like he carried a ton of bricks. 2 of his childhood friends were dead, and even though they grew apart as they were older, he couldn't help but feel the crushing weight of guilt. This thought led his mind to images of Jess, and her throwing away their friendship. His heart broke at the memory. He was so enraptured by the memory he nearly toppled straight into someone. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was lost in my thoughts." Looking up, he saw standing in front of him a grizzled, half-elven man. His body was wrapped by a thick black cloak, while some of his hair held the brown of his youth. Much of it had given way to the salt and pepper of his old age. He offered a small smile through his graying beard at Skamous. "Not a worry. You look like you've had a rough day at the trials. Come, there's a bar up the street. Join me in a drink and tell an old man about it." Skamous hesitated for a moment, then followed up after the man, thinking what did he have to lose? The bar he led them to seemed to be set in sunken ground. As they climbed the steps down into the pub, Skamous looked up to see a gilded sign that dubbed the place the Mud Hole. The strange name was quickly given cadence as he stepped into the bar and found himself thigh-deep in what felt like a warm mud bath. Trudging through the muck, Skamous found a seat at the nearly empty bar next to the old man. Coming out from the back room, cleaning out a metal stein, was a creature Skamous had only read about. The green-skinned, pot-bellied hobgoblin looked up at him expectantly with one good eye. The other seemed to be permanently closed, leaving his face in what seemed to be a permanent sneer. After a moment of silence, the green-skin spoke up. "You gonna keep staring, or you gonna order something?" Skamous shook himself. "Sorry, I just have never seen one of your kind before. I'll have a drink." The hobgoblin narrowed his one good eye at Skamous. "Yeah, I assumed that. You're in my bar. What else would you want? What kind of drink do you want?" The old man laughed and put his hand up placatingly. "Just get him my usual." The hobgoblin laughed and gave Skamous a smile. "Don't worry, kid. I'm just busting your balls." Then the hobgoblin set 2 steins on the bar and then hammered his fist into a wooden plank on the wall next to him. As he did, a hole opened in the wall above him, and a bottle ejected from it. Without missing a beat, the hobgoblin caught it in his hands and poured both of them a glass of red liquid. The man tossed it back, and then turned to look at Skamous, who was sipping the drink. "So, out with it. Tell me about your trials." Skamous was about to open his mouth to speak when the tavern doors were kicked open. Stumbling into the bar was the 4 guards Skamous had encountered earlier in the day at the gate. One of the ones who he hadn't spoken to stepped forward. "Hey, you trash gnome! You're gonna give us some drinks on the house, or bad things are gonna happen. It's gonna get nasty." The hobgoblin reddened. "Your lot already drank half my stores this week. I can't just be giving everything out I own. I'll go out of business." The guard gave a malicious smile. "Ugly, hick. Way it is, then." As the guard moved a step forward toward the goblin while attempting to pull out his blade, the older man stood up, blocking his way. "You better leave," the old man said in a calm tone. The guard looked shocked that anyone would dare stand in his way. Skamous could tell this was about to go badly, one way or another. But what would he do? That is for you to decide, my dear listeners. Would he stand with the old man and try and defend the hobgoblins? Would he sit and watch the fight play out? Better safe than sorry. Or would he help the drunken guards in an attempt to get in better with the city? Or maybe something else. You decide, my players. Hop onto our YouTube and cast a vote. If your idea is the one with the most likes at the end of it, we will go with your idea, and you'll be deciding Skamous' future in the comments. But until next time, let's write a story. Let's play a game without the dice.